Welcome to the Go for CEO channel, everyone. And once again, in the community, learning about startups to 25 million in revenue, the CEOs, the founders, the entrepreneurs, the managing partners, which is one of the ones that we have today. Excited to have this gentleman, a gentleman that over the last month or so, I've created a bit of a relationship with him, understanding where he came from, his business, and it's a truly dynamic one. So it's a new industry in the business lending side of things. And I won't steal his thunder, but thanks so much, Tom, for coming on board on the Go for CEO channel. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. And hey, community, remember to smash that like button, become a subscriber, and, leave a comment for Tom. What did you learn today about what he's going to share in his business, and share some thoughts so that we can communicate with you. I'll let Tom, get access to it and be able to comment back to you as well. And at the end, he'll be given his information of his business, his website, and everything to communicate with them if you really enjoy this message. So Tom, tell us a little bit about kind of your background, where you come from, and let the community know, who you are at the beginning here.
Sure. Tom Jones. I live in Wilmette with my two teenage boys and my lovely wife, who's an accountant. I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, so I'm a big Packer fan. I went to the University of Notre Dame and I got a finance degree in 1986, went on to New York to work on Wall Street for a couple of years, which was very exciting. Back in 1987 and 88, I was there when the market crashed on October 19th, 1987. I'll never forget that. Wow. So I did the Wall Street investment analyst training program in the investment banking unit of Prudential Beige Capital Funding. And after a couple of years, I decided to come back to the Midwest. So I came back to Chicago with the same company, Prudential Capital, who's still around and still has an office in Chicago. That's where I got my teeth cut on middle market lending. So we were lending, to private companies in the Midwest. I spent about a year and a half there, and then decided I wanted to be more of a relationship-oriented banker, not just a transaction-oriented banker. So I went on to American National Bank, which, back in the day was the bank in Chicago for businesses to do business at. In fact, their slogan was "The Bank for Business." I think American was around for about 77 years before Wow. Chase came in and swallowed them up, maybe 12, 15 years ago. So I spent 5 years at American, which was a great experience, really cut my teeth on lower middle market lending and developing relationships with all types of companies, manufacturers, distributors, service businesses, mainly around the tri-state and Midwestern area. And then I did a short stop at what now is US Bank. Again, commercial lending. I went over there to head up new business development for Chicago, but the bank, I didn't know this when I went there, was preparing, at the time it was called First Star Bank. They were preparing for a sale. So I left before the sale. And then I went to GE Capital. You probably heard of GE Capital at the time. They were the world's largest finance company. I spent 5 years there, and I figured, you know what, I'm 37 years old. I've always wanted to have my own business. This is a good time to do it. So, I had worked in investment banking, a merchant banking institution, a commercial bank, a finance company. And I thought I'm going to take that experience and start my own, what most people would call a loan brokerage firm. We don't really call it loan brokerage, but that's the best way to sum up what we do. We're really an investment banking boutique that specializes in arranging debt financing for businesses, and occasionally we'll help a company sell, occasionally we'll help them raise equity, but we really specialize in arranging debt financing. And we started February 7th of 2001. So we're coming up on 20 years.
Wow. Man, what an amazing ride. And thanks for recapping, kind of the history. A lot of people in our channel are probably wondering, hey, how did this guy start the business? How did she, think of it? What were some things that you kind of mentioned it real quick, like, hey, you started to acquire so much knowledge in different areas of the lending and banking world, investment banking world. But what were some critical things that you thought about when you said, I think it's time now? And how did you start to plan that out?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I started with a computer, a phone, and a beat up car.
Boom.
GE Capital actually you know, I told my boss at the time exactly what I wanted to do, and he thought it was a great idea. He said, Tom, I think you'd be great at it. I know some guys who do what you do, and, you know, let me know how I can help you. So they actually let me buy my car that I had when I was there, bought it from them. And I'll never forget, in February, I think it was February 7th, February 6th or 7th of 2001, I'll never forget walking into my boss's office and saying, okay, this was the day that we agreed I was going to start my business. And I had to turn in my, you know, my security badge and you know, my corporate credit card and the key to the office. And, you know, I just gave it all back and said, I'm out of here. And I'll never forget going back to my condo at 2626 North Lakeview Avenue in Lincoln Park. And, you know, I'll never forget getting home and going, okay, you know, now what the hell am I going to do? But no, I had a business plan, and, you know, the plan was start calling businesses that I knew, some that I didn't know, and start calling accountants, lawyers, and bankers, and investment bankers, and private equity folks, and consultants. Those are kind of the 6 groups I've always called on, and start looking for deals. And by deals, I mean a company looking for working capital financing to finance their receivables and inventory most of the time, or an equipment loan to finance their new equipment, or a mortgage on their building. Because a lot of what we do is what's called asset-based lending. But some of the loans we arrange are also service-oriented businesses that don't have a lot of collateral. But yeah, I just said, look, I'm going to get out my Rolodex, and I'm going to get a pen and a paper and a phone and start calling people. And we had our first deal in our first 30 days.
Wow.
And, you know, really, we've never looked back from that first deal. We've been cash flow positive since our first month, which I'm very proud of. And we've since closed almost 180 deals. I think we just closed either 178 or 179. At the end of the year, I always kind of, you know, tally it up and see how we did for the year and see how we're doing for the second decade. But yeah, I always had the idea of going off on my own. You know, I wanted to concentrate on lower middle market businesses. Those are businesses that are like 10 million to say 2 to 300 million in sales. Average client for us is probably 40 to 150 million in sales.
Wow.
The vast majority of them. I knew we were going to go nationwide and help companies all over the nation. So it was, you know, the plan was lower middle market, nationwide, working capital or whatever type of debt they need to run their business, with an occasional sale or equity raise. And most of these businesses are second or third generation, privately owned. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them. You know, they're metal fabricators, they're printers, they're food distributors, they're what I like to call middle America type businesses, you know, run by, you know, families typically, or many of them these days are run by private equity firms. A lot of them are sponsor owned these days, unlike 15 or 20 years ago when we first got going. So yeah, I mean, the intention was keep dealing with the type of clientele that I was dealing with when I was a lender, but instead of being the lender, I would be the middleman. I always like to joke around and say we're like a dating service for borrowers and lenders. You know, we really truly are. We ask the borrowers what they want, they hire us, and we go out and find it from the lenders. We truly are a matchmaking service in corporate finance. That's what we do.
What a wonderful insight. And, you know, one thing that comes to mind is I think the audience would love to know is structurally, you know, you're this middle person and you're putting these love matchmaking deals together, right? Of bankers and opportunities with business owners. So was it the foundational relationships that you already had from knowing a lot of banks? Or did you have private institutes that you knew that were lending sources? How did you structure that at the beginning? And especially that first deal, who did you go to, that type of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, you know, I really, to this day, do the same thing that I was doing prior to starting Concord. You know, I put on a nice coat and tie once in a while and go out and call on bankers, lawyers, accountants, consultants, private equity folks, and who am I leaving out? Investment bankers. So our accountants, lawyers, bankers, investment bankers, consultants, and private equity. Those are the 6 categories of folks that I've been calling on literally for 30 years. So when I went off on my own, it was just a continuation of calling on many of those same people, of course, developing new relationships with people in those categories. I'm active in a bunch of industry associations like the Association for Corporate Growth, the Turnaround Management Association, the Commercial Finance Association. These are kind of 3 very active, larger associations in the corporate finance industry across the country. So I've been a very active networker in those associations, which is how I kind of built up my database, if you will. And it's really just, going to these association events, having one-on-one meetings in folks' offices and asking if they have any clients who either don't like their bank or perhaps the bank isn't in love with them anymore and they need to find a new lender. So we're a lot of times taking companies that have had a rough patch, maybe a rough year or two, and their current bank, maybe they broke some covenants or they've underperformed, and the current lending institution is asking them respectfully to find a new home or to find a new lender. That's about 75% of our business. Now we'll help anyone that we think we can help with their debt financing. We typically like to start at 5 million. I think our website still says 2 million, but we like to start around 4 or 5 loan size. But yeah, we get referrals. 99% of our deals are referrals, and I'd say most of them come from bankers, and then several come from lawyers, a few come from accountants, and then we'll get some from consultants who might be working with the company on a different project, not finance related. Maybe they're helping improve the performance, or maybe they're helping them hire people. But they'll outsource the arrangement of new financing to us. So it's really a continuation of calling on the same people I was always calling on and just building that database more and more. And then, you get to know a lot of these folks over the years, of course, and establish pretty tight long-term relationships with them. And next thing you know, you're doing 8, 10, 15 deals in a year. We used to do 10 to 20 deals a year sometimes, but now we're trying to do kind of 6, 7, 8 deals with a smaller staff. So, but it's really, I always say I'm doing the same thing I've been doing for 30 years, but for 20 of the 30, if you will, or 34, I went from the lender to the broker or the intermediary, but the audience and where we get our deals is really the same.
So, one of the things that comes to mind, it sounds like you're in that 25 to $50 million of funding on a yearly basis. Where are you getting the money?
Yeah, good question. And some years we do a couple $100 million because we know some of our deals could be 50, 60, 70 million. We're looking at a $50 million deal right now. We're working on a $40 million deal right now in California. So yeah, those 6, 7, 8 deals could be a couple $100 million. They could be 50, 75. We try to do every year a minimum of kind of 50 million. Actually this year we've done exactly 49 million as of yesterday, because we just put out a newsletter yesterday. And obviously the bigger the deal, the more revenue we bring in. But in terms of where we get the money, an interesting statistic in our business is 70 to 80% of our deals are kind of in a hiccup, and they are leaving a bank where the bank is most of the time respectfully asking them to move on. And we are bringing 80% of those credits to another bank. People think, oh, okay, so you must have to go to New York Hard Money, and you must have to go to really expensive like loan sharks, to get the people refinanced that are excuse me, having to leave their current lender, and that's not true. I think the most expensive deal we've ever done, and it was only a bridge loan for 6 months, was 15%. It was paid back in 6 months. The vast majority of our loans are like 4 to 6%. Most of them come from banks. So we get a lot of our deals from banks, credits they just can't keep anymore. Or a lot of my banker friends will be looking at a credit and they can't do the loan for the company. So they will refer the chief financial officer to me, and we'll see if we can help them. So, but most of the deals get done at regional and national and sometimes community banks. And then the other deals are getting done at what I call, non-bank, non-regulated, what's well known as finance companies. We nickname those guys FinCos. You probably have heard that term. You probably read about it in the Wall Street Journal. So there's just hundreds of non-regulated, non-bank FinCos these days. So we have a fair amount of avenues to go down with new deals. A lot of capital resources in the United States to get these lower middle market deals done. Of course, everyone's got their own parameters. Some guys want to start at 10 million. Some guys want to start at 15 million. So we deal with a lot of the guys that kind of are in the $5 to $50 million deal range. But yeah, so the vast majority are banks. The rest are FinCos, and every now and then we'll go out to a specialty equipment finance lender, a specialty real estate finance lender. But a lot of our deals are getting done with banks that you've heard of, and probably a lot of banks that you may not have heard of. But that's where we add value, right? We're bringing people to the table that our clients otherwise would not know, and then we put the whole deal together.
So Tom, I mean, a next question that comes to mind is, I mean, it seems like you're like this lead magnet, right? You built all these relationships. You had acquired a lot of relationships before you went on your own. You've got these lending institutions waiting for these deals. They've probably got internal salespeople that are trying to do the same thing as you do. But so what is the structure with a bank or with a lending institution? Do they pay you directly? Are you charging the incoming prospective client a fee? How do you put that together?
Yeah, it's a great question. We almost always, without exception, represent the borrower. When we first started out, we would take a deal from anyone and we'd take a fee from anyone, right? Like anyone who would want to pay us to go find a loan, we were interested. But fast forward for the last majority of the years we've been around, we like to represent the borrower. So they pay us an upfront retainer fee to put together the package, if you will, the story of their company, what we call a confidential information memorandum, otherwise known as a SIM. So we write the story, we set up a data room with all the relevant information about the company. We send that out to prospective lenders after we are retained and they sign our proposal. And then we run a process where we solicit term sheets and proposals. We negotiate those proposals and try to get to the best overall deal from the most appropriate lending institution, in our opinion, for the client. It's a pretty standard model. I mean, most people who do what we do and most investment banks in the industry get paid by the borrower, and they have a retainer, and then they typically have some sort of monthly advisory fee, which is often credited toward the success fee. And then there's a success fee at the end. When you close the deal, you get a fee at the closing, and that's the bulk of the compensation. And of course, the most important part of the process, right, is closing the deal and getting the client the money and getting them the new lender.
So Tom, as these referrals come in, you start to have built a business and you're starting to grow throughout the years. Has there ever been situations, I'm sure there might be, but situations where that referral comes in, but then you have to basically justify your value of that extra fee or the retainer? How has that dynamic been for you? And what have you seen as things that you've been able to overcome? How have you overcome those objections?
Good question. Every company we're talking to is talking with lenders. Every deal we get involved in, they're meeting with 3 or 4 or 8 or 12 lenders. And of course, we have to convince them that we, at the end of the day, can do a better job than them finding their financing. And the way we explain that is pretty straightforward. We have these deep relationships, long-term relationships with these lenders, which our clients might have some long-term relationships with a few lenders. Maybe they even went to college with some of these guys, or maybe the banker's their neighbor, or the banker is a very good friend of their accountant or their lawyer. You're always going to have that where a lot of company CEOs and CFOs, of course, know bankers and have known them over the years. But we've been doing this. I've been doing this 34 years now, 20 at Concord, and we know the decision makers at the lending institutions. We know which banks like what industry sectors, which sectors they don't like. We know what the issues are going to be right up front when we take a deal to that lending institution. So we save our clients an enormous amount of time and pain by not having to sit through multiple different bank meetings and disseminate information to every one of them and answer emails and get on conference calls and meet the marketing guy and then the regional manager and the chief credit officer and the group head. And we go right to the decision makers at these institutions with a very good story, the right information, and we get a relatively quick answer as to whether they can do the deal. And then once they say they're confident that they can do the deal, we do all the heavy lifting and put the deal together. We negotiate the terms. We go back and forth on the proposals. We make sure the deal closes. It's a full-time job. I always say to business owners and chief financial officers who are trying to get the financing, we do this full-time because it is a full-time job to put every deal together. So you have to look at the time value of money too, for the time that these companies are spending putting their deal together. And when you calculate all the hours that a CFO and his team are putting into these deals, and they'll be the first ones to tell you, it's countless hours. It could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 months for some of the tougher deals. And you start adding that up, not only does it divert the management team away from the day-to-day activities of the business, which of course are most important, but you add up the time they're spending on the financing, and heck, it's probably in many cases the time they spend, if you calculate that as part of their salaries, it's more than our fee.
No, definitely
it's more than our fee. So
I had a gentleman named Matt, Strategic Voyage Business Consultants, and he's basically an outsourcing CFO service. And I could imagine you're thought of that way, right? You're this extension of the company that needs to make a move, especially when they're asking them politely to leave the current bank situation. And boy, that's there's financials, there's putting it together, there's the story that you have to put, like you said, the memorandums, and then sending them out to different areas. And God knows there's all different types of banks out there. There's Bank of the West and Bank of Internet and Bank of this, and they all have different needs and desires, right, to lend. So
about 10,000 of them to be exact across the country.
Wow. Incredible. And that's why too, right? You could do 50 to 100 million a year, and you've been in business for 20 some years because, they're like you, I'm sure there's competition out there, but that's the beauty of what you've been able to brand. So what are the things that you started to do to, besides obviously the personal relationship, was there anything that you did company wise to start branding yourself, or did you always still rely as an entrepreneur to be that you are the brand?
Well, it's kind of a complicated question. A lot of people often say to me, which I wish they wouldn't, especially when we had more people. We had, 5, 6 people a few years ago. A couple of those guys went into different careers, or a couple of them also went into business for themselves. I'd like to think I, trained them well so they could go do this on their own. But I lost my train of thought.
No, I was asking, just some of the things that maybe you kind of looked as valuable that you could share with the community is, did you start to put the name?
Yeah, on the branding,
Yeah.
Yeah, I had like four thoughts in my mind at the same time.
No worries.
On the branding, so a lot of people will say, well, Tom, when I think of Concord, I really think of you. And,
Yeah.
they've said this to me over the years, and I'm like, okay, that's nice that you think of me, but that's because you see me the most in the association activities, the board meetings, the events, but, really think of us as Concord. Don't just think of it as me. Think of it as Concord. But it was, it's always kind of hard to get that across because they, I am a very active networker, which is why I think our business has been successful. We've generated a lot of nice relationships and built those relationships. I like to be out and about. That's my personality. I'm an outgoing guy. I'm not an introvert. So I like to be, what's the old phrase? Out shaking hands and kissing babies. And, I enjoy it. And I get out there and do it a lot. So people see me the most from Concord over the years. But, I would say now that we're 20 years into it, I think we built up a decent brand. I mean, we're certainly, we're not in the same thought process or sentence as the larger investment banking firms, and we don't necessarily need to be or want to be. But around the Midwest, we have a pretty good name. It's easy to remember. People say, "Oh, Concord, you're the guys who do those debt deals." We get your tombstones. We see you on LinkedIn. I'm like, "Yep, we're the debt guys." In fact, I always tell people, if I talk to someone for an hour at a cocktail party or whatever, I'll just say, "Just remember, I'm the debt guy." Just think of us as the debt guys. Whenever you have any clients who need debt, give us a call. So I'd say the brand, I don't want the brand to necessarily be me because it's not about me. It's about Concord Financial Advisors and what we can bring to the table for clients. But those who know me well in the industry will tell you my name and face is kind of synonymous with Concord because we are a small firm. I'm out there the most. It's just kind of human nature, I guess, to say, oh, Concord, that's Tom. Oh, Tom, that's Concord. So, we don't need to, we don't need to spend a lot of money developing the brand. We don't need to do a lot of advertising. Our business is word of mouth. So I think where you're going with your question is, what have you done to build the brand? Do you hire people to help you with the brand? We don't really have to do that, which is kind of nice. Our business is all word of mouth. It's all referral. And, you build up a pretty good base of folks over 20, 30 years, and you should have a decent amount of deals every year. The two primary things we do to keep our name out there, which are very simple, they're cost effective, and they work, is, when we close a deal, we do what's called a tombstone. A lot of people get thrown off by that term. That they think of something in a cemetery. A tombstone is really just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper where we put, ABC company arranged $20 million of working capital financing. The purpose of the proceeds was for working capital and for growth. And we send that out to our database of about 14,000 people. So that's one way we stay in front of people, is when we close a deal, we kind of advertise it, if you will, with the tombstone. So the tombstone is pretty self-explanatory. It's, again, one piece of paper. We make it look pretty, and it just says what the amount of the deal was and for whom it was done. And then the other thing we do is we just started doing it about a year and a half ago. We put out a newsletter. We just sent it out yesterday. It's a good way to stay in front of people, but we try to make it an informative piece. We talk about the economy. We'll talk about what's happening in the debt markets. We try not to make it too long because we know people aren't going to spend 15 minutes reading a newsletter. So we keep them short and sweet. I think yesterday we touched on the election. We touched on the markets, capital markets. We touched on the economy and the incoming, how we think the economy will be affected by the incoming administration. So the newsletter and the tombstones are really simple, effective ways to stay in front of people. And then when we put out the newsletter, we put it on LinkedIn. Our tombstones go on LinkedIn. So between LinkedIn and staying in touch with our database through these couple of vehicles, I'd say our brand stays I don't know if the right word is fresh, but you
Mhm.
know, and in our industry, you have to understand it's kind of a tight knit group. Just like they say, Chicago is not a big city; it's a small town. I mean, we might have, I don't know, 20, 30,000 people or more in our industry across the country, but it's almost like you feel like it's a small group of people. Everyone seems to know each other. Everyone kind of knows what everyone's good at. So once our name is floating around in the circle of influencers in our industry, unless you really screw up and do a bad job on a bunch of deals, which we haven't done to date, your name's going to stay front of mind and fresh. But yeah, it's not like we have a $75,000 a year budget to build our brand. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it's phenomenal. I mean, I think a lot of people just, they get so overwhelmed, right? I'm going to need all this capital to start my own business. But I think the story that you're telling today, Tom, is look, you acquired some knowledge for about 10 or so years in the marketplace.
Yeah.
You did some good studies, you went to great schools and you set a foundation. You worked at big companies but you always had that heart of an entrepreneur. And you told your boss, that's a cool story. First one that we've had on Gopher CEO, that you literally told your boss, hey, look, I'm going to do this. And you came in with your own pink slip for him and told him that you're no longer working for him. So
Yeah.
awesome, awesome journey.
Those who know me well, and you and I just met recently, I don't know if it's a good trait or a bad trait. I'd probably say 50% of the people would say it's good, and 50% of the people would say it's bad. But I'm just one of those guys, and you can ask anyone who knows me well, from my wife to my friends to my neighbors to former coworkers. I will always tell you what's on my mind. I don't hide anything. One of the reasons I never would have been a great long-term banker, which is one of the 300 reasons I went off on my own, is in banking, as you can appreciate, and no disrespect to the profession or any of my friends that are in banking, but it's a very politically correct, kind of straight-laced business, right? Like, you got to make sure your tie's in place every day and your shoes are shined. And I have no problem with that sort of stuff. But I was the maybe one step shy of the bull in the china shop. Okay, I'm the guy who just tells it like it is. I'm blunt. I try to be respectful at all times and not disrespectfully blunt. But and that's why I went into my boss, who I still have a good relationship with to this day, and said, "Look, I got to be honest with you. I'm really thinking about going off on my own and starting my own business. No disrespect to the organization. I love my job. I love the money I'm making. I really did have a great life when I was at GE Capital. Really enjoyed the institution, met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of smart people who I still work with today on deals. In fact, one of my clients right now is a former colleague at GE Capital. He runs a very successful private equity firm, and we're doing a deal for him now. But I just always wanted to have my own business. I come from a family of 9 children. I think 7 of us are currently self-employed. 2 of them
Wow.
are effectively retired. So we have a lot of, I don't know if we're, serial or authentic entrepreneurs, but 7 of us do at the end of the day kind of work for ourselves. But we're not, we haven't started multiple businesses. We just kind of pick something we're passionate about and we run with it. So that's I just always wanted to have my own show, and I was never going to be that guy who I wasn't going to be the group head running the show at the bank, right? I just like to do deals.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good. I don't know if I'm not very good at it. I just don't like doing it. I'm not like I don't want to manage a bunch of people and be the head of the bank and have 5,000 people under me. I just like to help businesses get the financing they need and add real value to the business. And many times on these deals, we're saving these companies, we're saving jobs, we're adding real value. I mean, many of these companies without this financing would not exist. Okay, they would be extinct. So I feel in our little corner of the world, in our little small business we're running, we are having a fair amount of impact on these companies and the futures of a lot of people at these companies. And I love that. I mean, that's what really drives me. And that's what I'm passionate about is, you know, helping these companies get to the next step and, you know, have a long-term business and not short-term business. And, you know, obviously when you're part of a bigger company and a corporate culture, you know, you're adding value in your own little way. But at my company, you know, if we don't make stuff happen, we're the ones that are going to be to blame, right? You know, and when you're at a big corporation, you can always say, oh, well, my boss wanted to approve the deal. The chief credit officer didn't like the deal I brought in. But when you're doing what we're doing, you know, all the pressure is on us. We don't have anyone to blame. We have to make it happen, or, you know, we're going to have an unhappy client. So I kind of like the challenge of doing that. I kind of like the pressure. I like having the gun to my head, you know, where if we don't perform, we're gonna be the ones to blame. So it's a whole different mindset, obviously, right? In the, you know, I'd like to think when I was at GE Capital, I was an intrapreneur, but when you're an entrepreneur, it's a different ballgame, right? I mean, we got to get up every day and figure out where we're going to generate revenue, and if we don't do it, you know, our kids don't go to college, right? So.
You know what? You just said two exclusive words, right? Intrapreneur inside of a company, and you were always that. You gave it your best inside there, but you had the seed of greatness, the seed that apparently your mom and dad have done a great job for 9 kids to 7 of them to be adding to the small business environment and to the, you know, the fabric of America, especially this year. If you're watching this a couple of years from now, it's 2020 pandemic style, and you know, small businesses have been hurt this year in the United States, but you know, guys like Tom and Concord Financial Advisors are really just doing a great story. So, Tom, you know, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much over the last month or so that we've gotten a chance to get to know each other a little bit more, and jumping on the Go for CEO, because it looks like, I mean, you were driven by mindset and you went for that. You were Go for CEO in your mind. So we like to end usually our interviews with a couple of the acronym, right? The CEO. So we'll go. One of them is client experience, you know, and you went a little bit into that, but I'd love to know what your value proposition is to your clientele, and why Concord Financial Advisors is just top notch as far as client experience.
It's a good question. It's a loaded question, but the bottom line is, you know, we bring over 100 years of corporate finance experience to the table on every deal. Between Gary and Andrea and me, and we have a friend of mine that's kind of helping us part-time too. But you know, Gary's a former CFO and been in corporate finance, gosh, 35, 40 years. When you add up all the experience of Gary, Andrea, and me, you know, we're talking over 100 years. It's a lot of years, and you know, we bring real value to our clients by saving them a lot of time searching for the right lender under the right terms. So it's sifting through the 10,000 banks. And, you know, in addition to the 10,000 banks, by the way, there's probably another 10,000 finance companies and non-bank lenders in the country. We quickly, after really understanding the company and the financials and what they do and how they do it, you know, we spend a lot of time up front understanding and thoroughly knowing exactly how they run their company and what the pros are and what the cons are. Then we sift through all of the various capital sources available to them in the nation and narrow it down to the top, you know, 4 or 5, and then make sure they are with the most appropriate lender under the most, you know, appropriate terms that are favorable to them. So it's really saving people, and this is in our mission statement, and it's all over our website. It's saving people a significant amount of time and money by finding for them quickly and efficiently a creative financing solution to get them out of the jam they're in, or out of the lending institution they're in, whether they want to be there or not. So it's saving time and money with an efficient process to get to the right lender under the right terms. And we feel that we do it pretty well. One of the things we're most proud of that we haven't mentioned yet is we have a 95% success rate. If you look
Wow.
in the finance industry, and this is what most investment bankers and bankers have told me, kind of the industry average for getting deals done is about 50 or 60%.
Mm.
So about one out of every two deals, if you will, typically closes. We've only had 6 or 7 deals in 20 years not close. And it
Wow.
wasn't candidly because anything we did. The company either shut their doors or the bank respectfully had to liquidate the company, or something happened where we couldn't complete the process. So we're very proud of that statistic because it shows that the upfront work we do really pays off in the results at the end.
Getting to know your clients, delivering on their need. Awesome,
Absolutely.
awesome work. You know,
Absolutely.
so the Ian CEO is about employee engagement, but I want to go a different route with you. You've really established this incredible network, this associations and everything. What is it that you do differently? I mean, is it just, you go out to dinner every so often with this person? Do you go golfing so often, right? Like, what are you doing that's different in the engagement side with your referral sources?
Yeah, good question. Those who know me well would say that I'm a consummate networker. And I think the word I hear a lot from others about me, and there's some other words I won't use, but they say hustle. I'd like to think I'm a pretty good hustler. I get out there, you've heard the saying. I think Woody Allen was the one who came up with it years ago. That said half of life is showing up. There really is some truth to that.
Mm.
I can't tell you, how many times over the last, 20 years for sure at Concord, where, there's let's say there's a turnaround management association event at 5 o'clock downtown, and I'm working from home that day, and it's snowing. There's a snowstorm, and it's cold, and all of a sudden I look at my watch, and it's 3 o'clock, and I'm like, oh geez, I got to get to this event, and then you know you could say to yourself, I don't know if I'm going to drive downtown in the snowstorm to go to a cocktail event, but I'm happy to tell you that 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, I'm going to be that guy that drives through the snowstorm or the rain to go to the event, because I'm a big proponent of, if you go and if you show up, good, something good is going to happen. I'm always going to meet someone I didn't know before. I'm going to run into someone I do know that's going to possibly lead to something good, or just the good of it is just seeing someone I know and having a good catch up conversation. So I would say hustling and networking and showing up has kind of been my trademark for 20 years.
Unbelievable. You actually just dropped the bomb there. I don't have a time and a sound effect, but I love that part. And it actually reminds me, one of the things that maybe I haven't done enough in my 20 some years in the marketplace and different businesses that I've had, and now in the banking world and finance side. What are some things that are critical, which is showing up, right? Being there when you're
Absolutely.
needed. It's so remarkable, but so sometimes forgettable, or even the lazy part kicks in, right? The nuisance part. So
Yeah,
awesome, awesome.
I'll give you a quick, or just a real quick live example.
Yeah.
I was just talking, and no surprise for a teenager, right? But I was talking to my 16-year-old a few hours ago, and he's looking into a couple of activities at school. I won't get into the details, but he's thinking about starting a new thing at the school. And I'm like, well, you got to start talking to people, like talk to people at other schools who have started similar activities. And I'm sure everyone who has a teenager will appreciate this dialogue with him. But he's like, well, Dad, I found a guy at another school through, I don't know who gave him the name, but I said, oh, did you call him and really ask him a lot of questions and figure out how he started it and how he runs it and what they're doing? He goes, no, I sent him an email and he hasn't emailed me back. So, I'll either figure it out on my own or I'll find someone else. I'm like, no, what you need to do is pick up the phone, get his phone number and call him and have a conversation with him. And again, people have teenagers, I'm sure will appreciate this. He's like, Dad, pick up the phone. Well, no, I'm not going to call the guy. I'm just going to email him and ask him a few questions. I'm like, no, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call him and you're going to develop a relationship with him. and you're going to become his friend. And then he's going to tell you exactly how he did this activity or club you want to do. And you're going to have the roadmap to do it. And, it took me 10 minutes to convince him that, you need to call him and build a relationship and move the ball down the field. Right. And of course, today, these kids are so digitally oriented. They don't think about, picking up the phone and calling people. But I would say, again, with the hustle and networking we're talking about, you gotta, I've done it, and I think it's why my business has been successful, but you gotta pick up the phone, set up the meeting, set up the call, be proactive, and just, you gotta make things happen. I always remind my kids that one of my favorite sayings that Nike came out with before any of us is just do it, you know? So I think building relationships and networking and it's a numbers game, right? I mean, people say, well, how have you guys done so many deals? How have you been so successful? It really, at the end of the day, comes down to numbers, right? The more people you talk to and the more people you meet and the more relationships you develop, the more deals you're going to have and the more money you're going to make. It's just numbers, 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 right? So a lot of people, it seems, have a really hard time getting their head around that. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, even if you're a doctor, a lawyer, and whatever. I mean, right? The more patients a doctor sees, the more business they're going to have. The more cases a lawyer has, the more money they're going to make. But how do you find the cases? How do you find the patients? Right? You have to, you have to be creative. You have to find, it's a very competitive world, right? In every space that your people operate in, you have to be proactive and creative and find ways to build those relationships and establish those relationships. And I think the results will always speak for themselves.
Fantastic, man. It truly is. Who knows you, right? Nobody knows you. They can't. A guy follow Grant Cardone says if they don't know you, they can't flow you, cash flow you.
Yeah, and
So,
I always joke around. We could be the best debt placement firm on the planet Earth, but if people don't know our name and our phone number,
doesn't matter.
that's a problem.
That's right.
Right? Because we're not going to see the deal, even if we're the best in the world. So you just, you got to make sure a lot of people know your phone number and have your email address.
I love it. I love it. And the last one is O for operational excellence. You can give us a short answer if you'd like. What are maybe the steps that make you different at Concord of just operationally speaking that make you excellent?
It's a simple answer actually. We're small, so we're very nimble, and we don't have the overhead that other large firms have. We compete very effectively on 15, 20, 30, 40, $50 million deals when some of our competitors who are good friends of mine and smart guys and very capable, but they're much larger organizations. They have overhead that is 20, 30, 50 times what our overhead is.
Wow.
So we, I always say, and it's kind of a weird phrase, but I always say our work is kind of like Neiman Marcus and our fees are like Walmart. We can get away with charging lower fees for doing high caliber work because right now there's 3.5 of us, if you will. I mean, we do the same quality of work. Sometimes I would argue maybe even better because we each have 3 to 3.5 decades of experience doing what we do, but we don't need to charge anywhere near what the large bracket firms charge because we just don't have the overhead. So the simple answer is we're lean and mean, we're efficient, and we can lead on price and not even think twice about it. So it's kind of people always say to me, well, Tom, why don't you build other offices across the country? Why don't you really scale this thing? Why don't you get 20, 30 guys in every major zip code across the country and grow it and sell it and make a bunch of money and retire? And I say, nope, we don't want to do that. We like to be small and impactful and not lose control over the brand and over the reputation. Just keep it small. Just keep doing what we're doing. We don't have to do 50 deals a year. If we do 5 to 10 deals a year, we're happy. We want to maintain our success rate, our track record. So, we're lean and mean and we're efficient, and we don't have to charge a lot of money to be that way.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, Tom, I've been so grateful for all these owners, CEOs, founders of companies coming on to this channel. I think we're building something phenomenal. I want to get to about 1,000 videos. So,
Yeah, good for you.
0 to 25 million of gross revenue. You may be playing in a higher sphere, but if you know of anybody, I would love to have them on. So let's
Yeah,
share with the audience.
I'll think of some people for you. I think what you're doing is a great idea. I mean, obviously, the new, not so much new anymore, but the digital wave of getting your name out there and getting your product out there, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever. I think you got a great platform. I love your idea, and I really appreciate you having me on. I know you're probably looking for bigger companies and more, more important guys than me. But I appreciate you having us on and letting us tell you how we run our business in our tiny little corner of Illinois.
Well, Tom, you're being humble, my friend, because you've done hundreds of millions of dollars of difference in people's lives and their businesses' lives. And that's rippled into people having employees and being able to take their kids to college and all that type of stuff. So there's an immense ripple that you've dropped in the ocean. So
I appreciate that.
thank you for what you do. So tell everybody just where they could find you, your website, your phone number if you'd like, and then
Sure.
maybe LinkedIn profile.
It's Concord Financial Advisors with ORS, and Concord does not have an E, so it's CONCORD Financial Advisors. Our website is concordfinancialadvisors.com. Our main phone number is 312-759-9900. I am the managing partner and the founder and the guy who kind of runs the firm. And then Andrea Josselit, who's been with us for 12 years and has been just a fantastic part of our firm. She's in Northbrook. And Gary Billsland, who's been with us about 5 years, he's in Indianapolis. But best way to get a hold of us is call the general number or call, actually, most of the time the general number is ringing to my cell phone now that we have COVID going on. But you can also send us a note. My email address is tomjones@concordfinancialadvisors.com. tomjones@concordfinancialadvisors.com. We'd love to hear from folks. And, John, let's you and I stay in touch. And I really appreciate you including me in your platform and wish you all the best and wish everyone a very happy holiday season and a healthy and safe New Year as well.
Yeah, we're 1 week away from the Christmas season. It's crazy. 2020 is ending, and thankfully, it's been
I guess a lot of people would say that's a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. But hey, Tom, thank you so much. Really appreciate the mindset that you're being driven by. Mindset is our moniker to go for CEO, which is what Tom shared with you, throughout his journey. And you know what? Smash that like button. Leave a comment. I know Tom would love to share, some insights on what he's done further. And then, hey, Tom, in 6 months to 12 months, we'd love to have you back on. We're actually tomorrow interviewing our first interview that we ever had, Dr. Jim Clausen. We're going to have him on for a second time. So he'll be our second interview of the channel. And that's what we hope to do with you in about 6 to 12 months to bring you on and share the journey of where Concord Financial Advisors has gone from this date, December 18th, 2020. So thanks so much, Tom.
I'd love to do it. It'd be very interesting when we talk then to see what's happened with COVID and what's going on in the deal market, hopefully post-COVID. So that would be an interesting time to reconvene with you, John. But once again, really, really